Welcome back to Ready Freddy Camping Catastrophe. Yesterday, when we read this story, we found out that in chapter 3, which was called Tent Trouble, Freddy's dad accidentally left the directions for putting together the tent at home. So after they tried to put it together and still couldn't do it, Robbie had the idea of just laying the tent out like a tarp on the ground and then just sleeping on top of it under the stars, and everybody liked that idea. And then in chapter 4, when Robbie and Freddie were off looking for firewood, they came to a tree that had, well, first they tried to catch a lizard. They weren't able to catch it. They were close, but it slipped out of their hands. And then as they kept walking, they stopped by a tree where Robbie saw a big beehive, and Freddie tried to pull on the branch where the beehive was, and he ended up pulling it down. Out came the bees out of the hive, and they were chasing Freddie and Robbie, and that's where we ended yesterday. So today is called Here Fishy Fishy, Chapter 5. And before I start this chapter, I'm wondering if you've heard anything so far that makes this a camping catastrophe. Anything happen that they weren't expecting to happen or that they thought might interrupt their camping trip? Here, fishy, fishy. Jump in the lake, jump in the lake, Robbie yelled. The bees can't get us in there. We both dove into the lake with all of our clothes on, and we stayed underwater for a few seconds, hoping the bees would fly away. When we finally came up for air, the bees had disappeared. Whew, that was a close one, I said to Robbie. Yeah, a little too close. Next time, would you please listen to me? I know a lot more about animals than you do. From now on, you're the boss, I said to Robbie. Just then, my dad came down the path. I thought I heard you two screaming. Is everything all right? And why are you in the lake? I thought I told you boys to collect firewood before you went swimming. We came out of the lake with our shoes sloshing and our clothes dripping wet. My dad stared at us for a minute. Then he said, Would one of you like to tell me what's going on here? We had a little problem, Mr. Thresher, said Robbie. I can see that. Exactly what kind of problem, Freddie? Well, we were being chased by a swarm of angry bees. We jumped in the lake so they wouldn't sting us. A swarm of angry bees? That's scary. Why was a swarm of angry bees chasing you? Asked my dad. Well, it's sort of a long story, Dad, I said, giving Robbie a help me out here look. We happened to be right under the tree branch when something disturbed the bees' hive, so they chased us, Mr. Thresher. Really? Wow. I'm so glad neither one of you got stung. How about if we get in our bathing suits, hang those wet clothes up to dry, and do some fishing? Sounds like a good idea to me, I said cheerfully. We went back to the campsite, changed into our bathing suits, grabbed our fishing gear, and headed back to the lake. We found a nice big flat rock for all of us to sit on. It was near the water's edge. What kind of fish are in this lake, Mr. Thresher? Robbie asked. Trout. I hear they're really big ones, too. I think a trout was what Leo caught in a pond that was close to his house. I'm going to catch the biggest one in the lake, I bragged. We'll see about that, said Robbie. I'm a very good fisherman. So, Robbie, you've been fishing before? My dad asked. Oh, yeah, lots of times with my grandpa. Well, this is the first time for Freddie and me, my dad said as he tried to hang the lure on the end of the line. What's that, Mr. Thresher? Asked Robbie, pointing to the lure. If you've been fishing before, then you must know what this is. It's a lure. You know, bait for the fish. Oh, I've never used one like that before. You haven't? I asked. Nope, never. My grandpa and I always use worms. Worms? Yeah, worms. You mean like gummy worms? I asked. No, real live worms. Real live ooey gooey squishy worms? Yep, you catch the best fish if you use worms. Really? Can I try using one? Of course, Robbie said as he pulled a small jar of worms out of his pocket. Hey, where'd you get those? I went digging in my yard early this morning. I found some big, fat, juicy ones. Here, he said, pulling a worm out of the jar. Try this one. You'll have all the trout in the lake trying to eat that." He handed me the wiggling worm, and I tried not to let it slip out of my fingers as my dad stuck it on the hook at the end of my fishing line. "Sorry, little guy," I said to the worm, "but you're about to be lunch for a fish." Then I cast the line out into the water. "Now what?" "Now you sit and wait," said Robbie. "If you're going to catch a big fish, then you have to be patient." We sat there quietly for a few minutes, but then I felt a little tug on the end of the line. Hey, I think I've got something. I think I've got something." "Reel it in, reel it in," my dad yelled. I started to reel in the fish as fast as I could. "I think it's a big one," I shouted. "He's pulling pretty hard. I got the fish to the surface of the water. Look, do you see him, Dad? Do you see him?" But before my dad could say anything, the fish wiggled free and swam away, and I was left with nothing but an empty hook. "Oh, he got away," I said, disappointed. "Here," said Robbie, handing me another worm. "Try again." "But I'll never catch another fish that big. Did you see him?" "He was big, all right," said my dad, "and I'm sure there are plenty more like him in that lake. But you'll never catch anything unless you put your line back in the water." I stuck the fresh worm on the hook and threw it back into the lake. Then I waited and waited and waited, but I didn't feel even a single tug on the line. "Here, fishy, fishy, fishy," I called. "Come and get your lunch." Robbie laughed. "They're not dogs, Freddie. They don't come when you call." "Oh, yeah?" I said. "You're wrong, because I've got a huge one tugging on my line right now." I jumped to my feet so I could use more muscle to reel him in. I planted my feet firmly on the rock and started turning the reel as fast as I could. "That's it, Freddie!" my dad yelled. "Keep reeling him in. You've almost got him. He's a beaut." "Don't worry, Dad. I won't let him get away this time," I shouted. "Look at him, Robbie! Look!" I screamed as I jumped up and down. Then before I knew it, what was happening, my foot slipped. I lost my balance, and that fish pulled me, splish splash, right into the lake. "Hey, Freddie, what are you doing?" my dad yelled. "You're supposed to pull the fish out of the lake, not go in after him." "Ha ha, very funny, Dad," I said as he helped pull me out of the water. "I'm just teasing," said my dad. "Don't get so upset." "I just can't believe I let that one get away, too. And now I lost the fishing pole. It's somewhere at the bottom of the lake." "It's not the end of the world. But if we don't catch any fish, then what are we going to eat for dinner?" "I brought along some hot dogs in case the fishing didn't go as well as planned," my dad said, smiling. "So why don't you and Robbie go for a swim? What do you say?" I turned to Robbie. "Is that okay with you?" Robbie smiled, jumped up, and yelled, "Last one in is a rotten egg." And then he jumped into the lake. Chapter 6. Pass the marshmallows, please. I wonder what they're going to eat now. After we finished swimming, we walked back to our campsite and put on our clothes. They had dried in the sun. "I'm starving," I said. "When's dinner?" I figured you boys were probably getting pretty hungry as soon as we got to our camp. As soon as we get our campfire going, we can cook the hot dogs. "And the s'mores," I added. "Yes, Freddie, and the s'mores," my dad said, smiling. "We just need to pile up some of those sticks you guys gathered earlier today. Where did you put them?" I looked at Robbie, and Robbie looked at me. "Yeah, well, about those sticks." "What about them?" asked my dad. "Remember how we were chased by that swarm of angry bees?" "Yes." "Well, I think we left the sticks on the ground next to that tree when we ran for our lives." "We could go back and get them, Mr. Thresher," said Robbie. "That's a great idea. You guys go ahead. I'll stay here and try to get the food organized." "Are you crazy? I'm not going anywhere near that hive." "Don't worry, Freddie," Robbie said. "Those bees aren't there anymore. They flew off somewhere else to build another hive." "Are you sure?" "What did I tell you earlier?" Yeah, I know," I said, patting Robbie on the back. "When it comes to animals, you're the boss. All right, let's go." We started to walk off. "We'll be back in a few minutes, Dad," I called. It didn't take us long to reach the big tree. Luckily, the bees were gone, but our piles of sticks were still there. We picked them up and ran back to camp. "Here you go, Dad, 2 big piles of firewood." "Great job, boys. Now let's get this fire started. What do you say?" In no time at all, we had a roaring campfire. "I'm impressed, Mr. Thresher," Robbie said. "This is a great fire you've got here." "Thanks, Robbie," said my dad. "Your grandpa taught you how to fish, and my grandpa taught me how to build a great fire. He had a house way out in the country, and he had a wood-burning stove to heat his house. Whenever we went to visit, we had to build a fire just to keep warm." A growling noise interrupted his story. "Shh! Did you hear that?" Robbie asked. "What was it?" I burst out laughing. "Oh, that was just my stomach growling. I think it's saying time to eat." "Then let's eat," said my dad. "Here's a hot dog for each of you. Just put it on the end of one of those long sticks and hold it over the fire until the skin cracks a little bit and it gets hot and juicy." "You mean I get to cook it myself?" I said excitedly. "Of course, that's the best part of camping, cooking out over the campfire. Just don't get too close to the fire." Soon the hot dogs were done. "Just let them cool a few minutes and then you can eat them right off the stick," my dad said. "Really? I wish we could eat like this all the time," I said, blowing on my hot dog to cool it off. "Yeah," said Robbie. "Who needs silverware?" I took a bite of my hot dog. "Yummy," I said, rubbing my stomach. "I think this is the best hot dog I ever ate." "Me too," said Robbie, shoving a huge piece into his mouth. We gobbled up the hot dogs as if we hadn't eaten in days. "Time for dessert!" I yelled, and I jumped up and grabbed the bag of marshmallows. I can already taste the hot, gooey marshmallow melting in my mouth. "I love s'mores," Robbie said. "Whoever invented them was a genius." "You can say that again," I said. I stacked 3 marshmallows on the end of my stick. "Hey, Freddie, stop being a marshmallow hog and pass them over," Robbie said, laughing. I toasted my marshmallows until they were golden brown. Then I gently slid them off onto a graham cracker, set a piece of chocolate on top, and finished it with another graham cracker. "Look at that," I said, smacking my lips. "Now that is the perfect s'more." "Are you just going to keep on talking about it, or are you actually going to eat it?" my dad asked. "Oh, I'm just getting started, Dad. I'm going to eat this one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one." "Okay, I get the point," Dad said, chuckling. We ate s'mores until we couldn't fit another bite into our stomachs. "I think I'm going to be sick," I said, smiling. "Well, don't get sick on me," Robbie said. "If you have to toss your cookies, go do it over there," he said, pointing to the bushes. "I'm just kidding. I'm not really going to throw up." "Thank goodness," said my dad, "because I'll be in a lot of trouble with your mom if I bring you back sick." "Actually, I've never felt better," I said, and a big grin spread across my face. "I'm having a great time, Dad." "Me too, Mr. Thresher. Thanks for letting me come along." "My pleasure, Robbie. I'm having a great time too. What do you say we clean up this mess, set up our sleeping bags, and tell some ghost stories?" "Great idea," said Robbie. "I have some stories that will scare the pants off of you." That's the end of Chapter 6. Chapter 7 is called Shh, What's That? So you can make some predictions in your mind about maybe what's making a noise or what noise they're hearing. Thanks for listening.